Hi, everybody. Today we are going to crash our stash and use up some of those gel prints. And we're going to use those gel prints, combine them with a printable to create our own focal image. But first, we're going to create a beautiful background. This is yellow green, Prussian blue, and I'm going to put in a little bit of Naples yellow. That's going to kind of soften. It's not as harsh and it just adds a different tone to the mix. Now, my page here has been gessoed, and that is really important for the technique, the stencil technique that we're going to do. So give it a coat of gesso, let it dry, and then using a makeup sponge, you are going to put the paint on. And I'm not waiting in between colors. I'm even using the same makeup sponge here, mixing the paint wet on wet. And this is giving me a lot of variation. I've got some darks, some lights, and that's what I want in my background. Now, I am not going to cover the entire background because I am going to remove the paint through the stencil to get that patterning on there. So one, you need that background gessoed, the page gessoed, and two, you want to remove the paint with a baby wipe through the stencil before it dries, which is why I'm just doing it for this section, and then I'm going to apply more paint and then remove the paint through the stencil in kind of blocks. Now, when you're doing an art journal page, here I'm doing the same technique throughout the whole background. But I could only do this technique if I want it in one part of it. Key to removing the paint, gessoing it so that the paint is on a non-porous surface. So what you're seeing me doing here is I am just adding more paint, more color. I'm not even really worried about what's happening there, but I don't want to get it too blended. I do want some of the darkest blue and the lightest yellow, green, and as well as some of those mottled in-between colors. When you're removing the paint through the stencil here, you need to be a little bit gentle with your stencils so that you're not breaking them or twisting them up. So you want to make sure it lies flat and take your time. Now, part of this video has been sped up, but I am going slow. And where I remove the paint, that's where you get the patterning. Now, this is a background, and I know I'm going to put more layers on it, and I know that I'm going to put a rather large focal image on it. So not much of this background is actually going to show. So don't sweat the small stuff here. Yes, it looks like a hot mess, but in the end, it's going to look amazing. Trust me on that. You can find a cleaner portion of your baby wipe or grab a cleaner baby wipe. You can also use a damp cloth if you don't want to use baby wipes. So I'm just finishing up covering the entire background. I want some interest in my background, but I really do want my focal images to be predominant. So I don't really want to do too much. And really here, I think I'm just having fun creating a background because admittedly, at the end, you don't see much of it. Removing the paint through the stencil gives a very different effect. You could stencil this on with white and get something similar, but it wouldn't be exactly right. Now, this is a little too bright, and because I'm mindful of the fact that I want my focal images to really pop, I don't want the background, I'm giving this a wash of gesso. So I'm taking my gesso, watering it down a little bit, just brushing it over, and then just lightly removing the excess with a baby wipe. This just softens it, pushes the colors back just that little bit. I want the brightest thing on the page to really be my focal images. So speaking of focal images, what I'm going to do is grab some gel prints. Now I'm going to make these cute little sheep, and I'm going to cut the body out of a variety of different colored gel prints. So you can make a template like I did here, and trace around it, or roughly trace around it, because I'm really not. I'm making it bigger. You can make a template and make them all identical, or you can pre-cut, which is what I end up doing down the road. I alter the size, it's a little bit too big. But here I've traced out one, and instead of tracing out for each one, I'm just going to pick some more gel prints and put 2 or 3 or 4 together and cut them all at once. This just saves time. I'm not exactly sure which gel prints are going to look best on my background. So I am going to cut out more than what I end up using. And that's okay, because you can use the same steps and do this on a card or on something else. So here I'm just cutting it out. And as I said, later on off camera, I'm tweaking the size of these and altering them up and just cutting freehand. So wherever your comfort level is, you do that. Right now, I'm just trying to get a variety of colors and patterns on there, and then I'm auditioning them. I'm trying them out. What do I like? Do I like this yellow one? Do I like that one? There's blue in the background, so I'm looking for the blue or the teal on the gel print. Now, if you don't have gel prints, you can use scrapbook papers. Here's one setup that I had. You can use scrapbook papers. You can use paper, colored paper from magazines. You can even paint the papers yourself. So here is the printable. I've cut out many of the heads and the feet, and I am cheating. I am using printable instead of drawing it freehand. Now, the legs, I could have painted the legs on instead of cutting them out. But again, whatever or wherever your comfort level is, if doing it using the printable works for you, then use it. So I have a rough idea of where I want to go, but I want to add a little more to my background. I'm not done playing with it yet. So I grab this stamp. It is one of my favorite stamps. There are 2 texture stamps that come in this. It's from Stamperia, Songs of the Sea, and it's called Texture. I love and have used these a lot and highly, highly recommend this. If I can find it on Amazon, I will link it below. I started off with it on my acrylic block, and then I don't want it all so perfect. So I take it off the block. I'm braying on black acrylic paint and stamping on it. You can still see the stenciling that I did with removing the paint through the stencil. Now we've added a layer of black onto this background, and I'm just randomly putting it all over. I'm not being precise here at all. One of the things, you will be much happier in art journaling if you give up the idea that everything is so precious and everything has to be so perfect. Check your perfectionism at the door. I know I have, and I'm much happier doing that. So here is where we are with this background, and I am loving, loving, loving it. But I'm not. I grabbed this stencil from the Crafters Workshop, another favorite, and I'm stenciling on with white acrylic paint. This stencil is called Knitted Stitch. The first stencil that we moved paint through the stencil was called Swirling Waves, and I will list those in the description box below if you want to go look at them. They're all really good basics to add to your stash. Now, again, I'm mindful of the fact that I know I'm going to put several focal images on here, and I'm going to cover up a lot of this background. But I love making backgrounds, putting different combinations and colors together, and just playing. And if you find a great background, you can always duplicate it and use it on a different project, or do it with a different color scheme. Here I'm just putting the stencil back on and going over it again. I want the white to be a little bit more opaque. Now here is this, and oh, I love this background. Totally will be making this background again to use for something else. Can we say love, love, love? So I'm thinking the background is pretty much done and I'm ready to put on my focal images. But before I do that, I am going to edge my page using my shading technique with my angle brush. This just frames the page. I do it 99.9% of the time. Yum. So now that I have my angle brush out, I am going to shade around the bodies of my sheep. This is going to add definition to it. It's also going to define where the sheep end and the background begins and allow the sheep to stand out. It's just easier to do some of this now before I glue it down. But if you glued it down first, you can shade it afterwards. No fuss, no muss. This really defines the fluffy body of the sheep. So this one is pretty plain. There's no pattern on it. So I decided to grab some blue. Remember, blue's in my background, and I'm just going to add some marks on it with this stencil. This stencil is called Stitched Art. It's just one that I happen to have on my desk, so I grabbed it. It's the right size. And again, I chose blue because there's blue in the background, and I want it to tie in with the background. I wanted bright colors for my sheep's bodies, but I also wanted to tie it in to the background. You can add any marks. Now, I said you can use scrap papers for this. You can use magazines that are colored, and then you can add your own marks on it. And if you wanted a very specific color that you didn't have in gel prints, what you could do is just paint sheets of paper, cut out the shape, and then do whatever stamping or stenciling on it that you wanted. Here's this yellow one, and I decided, I'm going to add this swirling waves one with the teal on top of it. And that's the look I got. I didn't end up using that one. It was a little too much matchy-matchy, but it's in there for using for something else. I've rearranged the sheep on the page. I'm liking how they're looking. And then I'm just cutting out the legs. As I said earlier, if you want to just paint basically rectangles in for the sheep, for their legs, go ahead. If that is simpler to you than cutting it out. Now, some of the sheep I'm giving 2 legs to, some I'm giving 4. Again, how you turn the body, where you put the head, you have a lot of variation. And I did play a lot moving things around and trying to figure out how exactly I wanted to do that. But I didn't put that all under film because, well, you've got better things to do than watch me move things half a centimeter over this way and that way. So once I'm happy, I do take pictures of it, and now I'm ready to glue it down. And I am using Fluid Matte Medium from Liquitex to glue it down. And I'm putting the body down a little bit and then reaching under and gluing, kind of sticking the legs under it. And again, I did spend a lot of time, but seriously, people, it doesn't have to be so precious. I'm not going to glue the heads on just yet because I want to have all 4 bodies on and then finalize where I want to do it. I think these sheep are absolutely adorable, and I have wanted to put this on a page for so long. And I guess today was the day. Want some variation, so I want each one to look a little bit different, have their head turned a little bit of a different angle, just to add some more interest into the overall page. So I got 2 down, I've committed, now I just need to make it work. And I like the idea of overlapping them a little bit. I think it would be cute if you did all the sheep in the body is the same color and did a different stenciled pattern or stamp pattern on each one. There are so many variations you can do from this. And I hope you play with it and come up with a different idea, and then you share it with me in my Facebook group. I'm giving it a coat of the fluid matte medium on top to seal it because I am going to do some shading on it, and I want that paper, it's just copy paper, to be sealed. And of course, I dried in between. Now, because that's just photocopied printables, I just want to darken it. So I'm painting the hooves a darker black to make it stand out. That just automatically adds to the page. And then I am shading around the focal images with black acrylic paint and my angle brush. And you can see as I'm doing this, the ones that haven't been done compared to the ones that have. This is making the focal image stand out, which is what you want. You want that background as lovely as it was. As much as I loved it, I don't want the background to be the first thing we see. So it looks like it's a field behind all my sheep. It's kind of the look I was going for. So I'm shading on top of the gel print and on top of the printables and outside them. And I do a lot of shading here, and I do not put it all under camera because, well, it takes a long time and it's a lot of repetition. You don't need to see me doing all of it, but I'm going around the the top of their head, on their face, the nose, the ears, all of that's getting shaded, and that's really bringing the printable to life. Here I'm shading the nose and the ears. Then I decided instead of leaving the top of their head white, I'm going to paint it a solid color to match the body. And part of me likes it better this way, part of me likes it better with white. What do you think? Would you have left them white or would you have colorized them as I'm doing here? Again, there is no right or wrong, and you can mix it up. I just thought there was a lot of pattern on the page. I wanted a little bit more solid color. Using gel prints is a great way of saving time because you're not pulling out the colors and recreating. And we all have a lot of scrapbook papers, a lot of magazine papers, a lot of gel prints. So let's use them up. I'm painting the eyes white here, and I will be putting the dots back in. It just was very much copy paper, and it was looking a little thin, and I wanted to whiten and brighten them a little bit. So I'm giving it a good coat of white paint here, and then once it's dry, I'll come back and deal with the center of the eyes. I decided to grab my fine line applicator bottle. Now this has thinned white acrylic paint, and I am going to outline the top of the head of the sheep and the body of the sheep with white. And combining this detailing with the black shading that I did really makes my focal image pop. Can you do this with a white gel pen? Yes, you can. I have my fine line applicator bottle and I love using it. So now I'm just speeding up the video a little bit here. And you'll see me doing that. Now, I'm not being precise at all. It doesn't need to. In fact, the more you randomize it, the quicker you go, the less perfect it is. It actually adds to your page. So don't be afraid, you know, of tracing outside the lines, I guess. I think you might see me doing more things with the sheep. I have an idea with the sheep for a canvas. So we may revisit this. Now I grab my black fine line applicator and I'm putting the centers of the eyes back in. And I'm making them fairly big and fairly dimensional. And it just adds such personality. Each one can be just slightly different. And again, you're adding interest by doing that. And then I'm going to trace around the eyes with the black and the nose and the ears. Again, I want to make my focal image stand out a little bit. A good splatter with white paint. And then I decided to stamp an image or a sentiment on here. And I just pre-stamped it with my acrylic or my archival ink just to get the size to make sure it would fit. I didn't have a large space here, but it will fit the sentiment. You got this. So here are my wooden letter stamps. I have white paint on the Ranger blending foam, kind of using it as a stamp pad. I put the white paint on and then stamp it on the page. And I'm doing white here. I wanted to lighten the page. Now you're not getting a perfect stamp here, and hang on, I will rectify that later. Doing an art journal page is a series of what's the problem now and then solving the problem. It's solving problem activity. You get to a certain point and then, okay, now how do I bring this out? What do I do here? This is too bright. I can do a wash. This is doesn't have enough pattern. I can stamp more. So the stamping here is a little bit getting lost because of the busyness of the background, because of everything else that's going on. And in a minute, I'm going to show you a way of fixing that if you think it needs to be fixed. I'm cleaning off my wooden blocks after I stamp with them. I don't want to leave the acrylic paint on it because over time that will destroy my stamp. Now, what I could have done before I stamped with white is did a wash of blue to darken that background. Didn't do that, but here's how I'm going to make the white stand out. I grab my fine line applicator bottle and I'm using the stamped image letters as a guide, and I'm just flooding them in and making them solid white. So now they're white and they stand out. But alternatively, you could have done a wash of blue or green in the background, and then by light darkening the background, the stamping would have stood out better. So two possible fixes, two different looks. Oh, just got another idea of something I can do with these sheep. If you want to see more about with sheep, let me know in the comment section. Then I'm using the fine line applicator bottle to put some marks around it to outline it. I'm doing dash, dot, dot, dot. dash, dot, dot, dot. And I'm just mixing it up. The dashes are different lengths. I'm not trying to be so perfect or so organized. Once it's dry, I take off the tape at the top. And what do you think? I am very happy with how this turned out. Until next time, go get creative.